Welcome to another special edition of Why Blank Lost as we discuss Survivor Tocantins episode 12 or episode 13 if you go according to CBS All Access or Wikipedia. But no matter what, it's about the vote out of the one and only coach. I'm David Bloomberg, and those of you watching on video have by now figured out that the other person with me is not Jessica Lewis. This week in our RHAP off-season journey through time, I have a special guest from the podcasting class of 2020 as a guest host. So welcome, Sarah Carradine.
Thank you very much, David. Hi, everybody.
So Jessica was unfortunately, she has this unavoidable work commitment that came up rather suddenly, and Sarah agreed to step in. So maybe we should start. Sarah, what is your Survivor history?
Well, I'm what you would call a passionate amateur, definitely a casual, not an expert like you, nor a player like Jessica. I'm from Australia. I'm Sarah from Sydney. Some of you may know me from my B&B quizzes. The first knowledge that I had of Survivor was I was actually in New York when the first season was being broadcast, and a friend of mine worked at the broadcast company and had a buff. So we sat and watched it in our buffs. They were the promotional buffs, and then I really didn't pick it up again till Nicaragua, and I remember people talking about it and saying it's so great, and of course that's Fabio, and I thought, I don't know about this so much. But I stuck with it and really became much more into it during One World and Philippines with those two amazing winners, Kim and Denise, who we just saw again. I was very excited to see them again. And then once you start listening to Rob Has a Podcast and the whole network of many Survivor podcasts and others, the interest just grows and grows. So that's my story.
All right. Well, again, welcome. And in honor of you joining me on this podcast, I wrote you a poem.
Ooh. Oh.
Okay. Mm-hmm. With friend and foe, we march to the battle plain. Some to seek success, others to seek fame. We play with honor for the love of this game. And with armor or without, we will toil in vain, so that someday, someone, somewhere will remember our name.
David, that is so beautiful. Just a moment. I just have to wipe a tear from my eye. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. And for me, I haven't slept in 3 days. I haven't eaten in 3 days. I've had no water, and I feel absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I'm just glad that when Coach read that poem, which he obviously stole from me, the jurors were falling asleep. So I'm glad that didn't happen. I must have recited it better.
I think there's something in your tone that really gets past the fact that we toil in vain so that someone will remember our name. In other words, nobody remembers our name.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Coach has a kind of very interesting relationship with the English language. I don't think words mean quite what he thinks they mean.
Yes, that's true. Now, what I did think was really funny was Stephen Fishback was right there when Coach read this poem and everything that happened around it. And then he went on Survivor Second Chances, and recited a poem of his own. It's like, apparently he didn't learn.
It's your job to make everyone learn, David, and
that's right.
When they do, we'll all be perfect Survivor players.
There you go. As a matter of fact, yes. That's what we're here for. So for anyone who has not seen this podcast before, or if you haven't, just need a reminder, or even if you don't need a reminder, I'm going to tell you anyway. Each week, as we do during the season, right now, we'll look at how Coach did compared to the rules I originally wrote way back after season 1 and have been modifying ever since. As the regular listeners know, we watch the whole season up to this point so we can gather together everything and then add in secret scenes and interviews from the time, including my own. My rules have, of course, changed since then, and people can check out the most recent version at robhasawebsite.com/blog/survivor rules, or they can get the shorter and much more colorful version in poster form right behind me here at, at tinyurl.com/David Rules Poster 2. And of course, as Jessica would tell you if she were here, this was designed, drawn by Eric Reichenbach. And if you are from outside of the US, such as Sarah is, you can contact Jessica through Twitter, DM her, because eBay won't sell outside the US. And then our shipping department, known as Jessica, will take care of it. In addition to the poster, we do have another way you can get the rules and always have them with you, and that is t-shirt form. So that you can get at robhasawebsite.com or robhasapodcast.com. Click the merch link near the top, sort the store so the new items are first, and poof, the shirts will be there. So, for those people, a little bit more announcements before we move forward here. For those who may have missed our announcement the past couple of weeks, we have expanded Why Blank Lost to include Big Brother All-Star season. So for a couple more weeks, you'll be getting a double dose of Why Blank Lost. And as I mentioned, we're doing things a little bit differently there because we're bringing in guests each week. Some will be people you know, some will be new names. We hope there'll be a good mix. And we appreciate everybody who reached out to tell us about how you enjoyed the first episode with Ronnie Talbot from Big Brother 11. And anyone who hasn't listened, I think you should give it a listen, because even though the title is Why Keisha Lost, and you may be like, well, yeah, we know why Keisha lost. First of all, we think that we still add something to it, but also there's a lot of other discussion. I think one of the best parts of it was just Jessica and Ronnie swapping reality TV stories.
Yes, it was very insightful to have both of them, and particularly him having been in the house, just talking about the day-to-days, some of the logistics, what he learned by not winning himself. It was really fascinating. As a newbie to Big Brother as well, I found it fascinating. Okay.
Well, good. Now, we have several things to discuss before we get to Coach, as we usually do. And I'd like to start, although I've already referenced my friend Stephen Fishback, I'd like to start with him. Although he's a know-it-all now, when his season was airing, I was his know-it-all. I interviewed him after the finale. And as we were talking, he said, I read the site every week, your guys' recaps and analysis. I'm nervous. This is the one I'm most nervous for. This is the source for behind the scenes talk. So, of course, he was talking to when, I used to write, or when we ran Reality News Online. And, however nervous he may have been, he did make it through the interview just fine.
And he made it through the seasons pretty well as well.
Yes, he did. Now, I speaking of Stephen, I noticed that in episode 2, he was having fun hanging out with JT and admitted it might make him look like JT's awkward, goofy right-hand man. Now, we've seen people get the $1 million quotes early in the season before. I've never heard anyone get the $100,000 quote before, because that's basically it. I mean, he was basically telegraphing, I'm coming in second.
He didn't intend to.
No, he didn't intend to, but, that's the way it came out. But on the plus side, as much as people make fun of Stephen for some of his challenge performances that we've seen, he did win the challenge for his tribe in the second episode by making that, winning basket. And he won individual immunity later in the season through an amazing comeback to solve a memory and math problem.
It was extraordinary. I really liked that he explained how he did it as well, because it looked like a feat of magic, but it was logic.
Yeah. I do also have to say, I love the fact that he tried to get them to name the merge tribe Dingus. And he came up with this whole supposed backstory about what the word means. Well, in this language, it means da 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 da, and it's dingoose. And people were like, "There's no way Jeff Probst is going to say, come on in, dingus."
Well, he might, but it's not going to be your tribe name. He tried to give it a very nice quality with the dingoose. Dingoose. So, no.
Now, I had also forgotten how much everybody absolutely loved JT. Brendan wanted him gone, and then went on one reward with him and was literally trying to plan a way for JT to get to the finals. And he said if JT won, it would be like him winning.
That was extraordinary. I have to say, look, watching the whole season again, I mean, I've had in my head, Stephen was the mastermind, Stephen was the strategic powerhouse. But to see my view of JT's game, I always liked him, but to see the season from beginning to end and watch he is strategic. He's very able to read people. He understands very much how he's seen. And he used that to his advantage. And everybody absolutely loved him. Even Debbie was saying, take me to 3 and I will give up immunity and send you to final 2. But it was really because of JT.
Yeah. Now, Stephen actually told me in our interview, he said Timbira had this weird obsession with him. They were like, you're the perfect human being. The only flaw is you're friends with Stephen.
But that was such a great asset rather than a flaw, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. As we've seen when JT has played by himself.
I think that's what might have tarnished our thought about his first season, was to see him in his subsequent seasons. But to go back, and I do recommend it if you have the time, if you have 13 hours, to go and look at it and actually see what a strong player he was. I think we've in our minds sort of downgraded him somewhat. So it's really worth a rewatch.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because, I have now I watched him going forward, and then I watched him going backwards because Heroes versus Villains was what, 2 weeks ago, something like that we did. And so we saw him then with his, dumb plan to give away the idol to Russell. And so, but now seeing it going backwards, that means the most recent thought of him I have in my head is his best game.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So now, I mentioned last week that when I originally watched the season at the time, I was not a fan of Tyson. And watching it back, I truly don't know what I was thinking back then. I mean, I already know he's hysterical from his later appearances, meeting him in person. I guess I just didn't get him back then for whatever reason, which I don't understand because he's such a sarcastic smartass, and I love people like that. So I don't know. My old self was wrong.
I do remember you saying that about having not been a fan of him in the first place. And I had, David, I have to say exactly the same thought. He's a dry, sarcastic smartass, and so are you. Surely you would have seen yourself in that gorgeous package with that beautiful face. And in fact, I was thinking, well, why did Tyson lose? Perhaps we should do why Tyson lost, although I'm sure you wrote about it at the time.
Yes. I'll send you that link.
Thank you.
Now, I do have one more thing I want to mention. I think both of us will appreciate this. In the very first tribal council of the season, there was a discussion about whether or not Sandy should be voted out. And Jeff Probst asked if it was fair to vote out Sandy, quote, just because she's old. Jeff Probst, she's not old. She was older than the rest, but she was 53. She wasn't 105. Now think about this. Jeff Probst is now 5 years older than she was then. And I wonder what he would think if someone came up to him and said, Jeff Probst, you're old.
The way he speaks to women and men is perhaps a subject for another discussion. But that idea of the old woman or the older woman, and it's certainly why in that first instance, as soon as they get off the truck and they have to vote someone off, they look around and they pick her. They feel like she's not going to be strong. And it's the same with Reem going first. She felt it was because she was the middle-aged woman. But I think our first encounter, David, you and I tweeted at you and said, how does the older woman avoid being the first one out? And do you remember what you said back to me at the time? We were talking about Reem. You said basically do everything the opposite of what Reem just did, because for you it wasn't it wasn't her age and it wasn't her being the older woman. It was, you know, a series of choices that she made about how she wanted to play, and I found that very interesting. And we see with Sandy that although she's the first one that they get rid of, she stays through till, I've got my notes here, she stays through till the fourth tribal council.
Right. Which was only their second vote, because the other tribe went twice. But I also, I still don't think it was because, well, first of all, again, Jeff Probst, she's not old. 53, not old. Older, I'll grant you that, but not old. But I think other aspects of Sandy's personality, you know, I'd have to look back at why Sandy lost, but I'm pretty sure from watching it, I have a good idea of what I said.
Yes, yeah. Because in and you know, spoilers aho, in season 3 of Australia, the reboot of Australian Survivor, the winner was 63, a 63-year-old woman,
right?
And nobody called her old, but she's an Olympic gold medalist, so you know, maybe. But she, in fact, used that to her advantage. She's an athlete. She's an incredibly strong woman. She's, in case people don't know, she was a swimmer. But she, in fact, used the view of herself as an older woman to downplay her threat.
Right.
And won, you know. So
yeah. All right. Before we get to the rules, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss?
No, I think that it's interesting. I wanted to talk about JT, and I wanted to say how nice it was to see, you know, Tyson in his first game and see the seeds of you know, the great player he was going to become. But he was a good player then. He just you know, hitched his wagon to slightly the wrong star. Even though he said that he was twice the player that Coach was.
Yes, well, at least. So, all right. Well, before we fully engulf ourselves in the rules, I want to quote something from those rules that we occasionally have to say as a reminder of what we do here. I bring it up a lot, or I bring it up because a lot of what Coach said, both on the show and in interviews after, contained some version of the claim that he wanted to change the game and not necessarily win. But as the introduction to the rule says, the presumption here is, quote, is that the player actually wants to win the game. They shouldn't be there for the experience or to face the toughest opponent or whatnot. Survivor is a game, and the goal is to win. Period. That is the basic assumption here, and these rules can lead good players to that end goal. To quote Harry, a super fan on the most recent season of Australian Survivor, people should play to win.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that you say is that production is making a television show and the players should want to win the game. And
right.
I mean, that's something that I'm sure we'll talk about with Coach, but he was aware of the television show very much so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this was the type of episode where the viewers knew Coach was getting booted, and we just kind of got to sit back and watch. I don't know if there has ever been anybody more melodramatic than Coach. And knowing that he was getting booted only added to that drama, us knowing. Coach fought in the immunity challenge with swelling music as he gave a primal yell while in the final moments. But he didn't realize that would be it for him. He thought his warrior alliance would take him to the very end. That damn evil wizard, Steven, joined the women and turned on him. What happened? How did he make it this far? And why couldn't he make it to the end? Where could he have possibly gone wrong? Let's once again figure out why Coach lost.
Yes, let's.
So the first rule says to scheme and plot. And while our first instinct might be to say Coach didn't do this because he was playing honest game, and allegedly wanted to take the best players to the end, that actually wouldn't be quite true. In fact, Coach did scheme and plot, especially early on. As we would see him do time and time again, he had ways to rationalize this. But from his tribe's very first vote, we saw him turn people against Candace after she suggested he should go. Then Tyson told him that Brendan was making allies on the other tribe with his repeated trips to Exile Island, and Coach immediately jumped on the idea of voting Brendan out, which I'm sure had nothing at all to do with the fact that Brendan was supported as a better leader by some on his tribe.
And nothing to do with that.
No. And of course, Coach made alliances with JT and Steven, and later he tried to bring Sierra back into an alliance, despite having made it clear that she was definitely not one of the best people in his eyes. So yes, he did scheme and plot.
Yes, that's true. And those are all the notes that I have, but he did it in a very reactive way, I think. So on the first day, or in the first episode, certainly we see him approaching Brendan, saying, let's get together. I am very honest and I have integrity and I can see that in you. And then immediately, confessional from Brendan going, I'm not sure about this guy. You could see that as soon as the idea of who was the leader of the tribe became, well, it was only a choice of the men, of course. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that it was Brendan. In fact, Jerry was asked at a tribal council, who's the leader. Coach is ready to be named. Again, Brendan is named. And I think so his scheming and plotting against Brendan was an emotional and reactionary scheming and plotting, I think. He does do something very clever where he rewrites the narrative. It'll surprise you to know. He rewrites the narrative at a point where he's talking about what the Warrior Alliance has done. He talks about doing this, that, and the other. And, of course, getting out Tyson when he started to be sketchy, completely obliviating, that's not a word, the fact that he was oblivious to, in fact, it was a blind side of himself when Tyson went. He didn't know what was happening. But he then assumes that into his narrative of his strategy. We got rid of Tyson when he started to get sketchy. So it is scheming and plotting, but it's very reactionary after the fact scheming and plotting, in my mind anyway.
Yeah, and even whatever he did, he clearly wasn't the best strategist there. In episode 11, JT told us that he felt he was a few steps ahead of Coach in strategy, and my immediate thought was just a few steps. Yes. He would tell Coach whatever he wanted to hear to make him think they were on the same page. And in the beginning of this episode, kind of the whole thing, like exactly what you were talking about, changing the narrative, Coach said he knew he was no longer in control of the tribe. Yes. Well, I have a hint to send back in time to Coach. You were never in control of the tribe. He and the rest of Timbira worked hard to get to the merge with the majority and just threw it all away.
Yes, he made no attempt to, when he thinks it's a good idea to have Sierra's vote again, or I think Debbie alerts him to the fact, he made absolutely no attempt to woo her. Debbie says, so you'll do whatever Coach wants. And Coach says, well, you've got no choice. And of course, Sierra thinks, well, yes, I do have a choice. So even having that strategy handed to him, we'll get the Timbira fall back together. We'll bring back in Erin and Sierra. He didn't think about how to do it. He just demanded that Sierra come back to him after the appalling way that he spoke to her. Appalling. But he didn't ever see it from the other person's point of view. So he decided Sierra had no other option, rather than wondering what other options Sierra might have and how he could present himself as a better option.
Right. And then another reason on top of that he was not exactly the best strategist was he wouldn't lie. And he said that, he said that he wouldn't lie. We'll get to that. But he wanted to surround himself with warriors, adding that even if they beat him, that's the honorable way to play the game. No, that's the dumb way to play the game, because it is a game. But of course, not to Coach. When I interviewed him and asked him how taking the most deserving and strongest players to the end would be a winning strategy, he said it was a different strategy. As I said, I wanted to change the game. If I won along the way, it would be a bonus. It was almost a winning strategy. Okay, that's what he said. Personally, I would say it was nowhere near a winning strategy.
Yes, Debbie had more of a winning strategy than he did, but
yes,
let's not compare.
Well, Yeah, and it wasn't even just that Coach was gung ho about his way of playing. It was that he also criticized those who played the game correctly. Such as when he was talking about Sierra a couple episodes earlier, and he said she's going to do whatever it takes to get farthest in the game without any honor. Oh, the horror! She's trying to get farther in the game. How could she?
Yes, or played the game at all.
So
Jeff at the beginning of Coach's Boot episode says,
okay.
I did notice, David.
Oh, we seem to. Oh, there you go. Okay, there you are. Lost you.
Here I am. Okay, I did notice in the beginning of Coach's Boot episode, Jeff's voiceover says, Coach thought he was in the driver's seat. Coach was clueless. And then can Coach regain control? At which point both you and I went, well, he never had control in the first place. I think Jeff really enjoyed having Coach around and really enjoyed pressing his buttons. And the other people that really enjoyed Coach were the sound editors who loved to put all that swelling music in around him.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now I think we can move on to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. Coach certainly didn't have a problem with scheming and plotting too much because, well, he never, we knew that. But he never kept his scheming secret because he was always very clear as far as who his allies were. With this knowledge, JT and Steven could plan their moves easily, knowing who to boot when. And Coach, on the other hand, never, as we've already been talking about, never really understood the true alliances in the game.
Yes, I think that's true. He certainly didn't do it too much, but there was no secrecy about what he wanted to do. He said in episode 12, my instincts are that Taj has to go. So JT at the time said it's tiring to keep reassuring him. But one of the great things was he was so completely predictable about what he was going to do that he was very easy to get around. I don't know if that counts as not keeping your scheming secret, but I think so. He was very vocal about his likes, his dislikes, who was to go next, who was honorable, who was dishonorable, who was cancer, who was poison, who was, iron sharpens iron and all of that. So, yes, not scheming too much and certainly not keeping his moves secret, such as they were.
Yeah. So the third rule talks about being flexible. When Coach was on Exile Island, he said his character is, quote, unbending, unyielding, immovable. And that's really about all we need to hear because he was right. In this case, he was 100% correct. As we've already discussed, he came to change the game of Survivor. But that's not what a player should be there to do. He was fighting a battle while everyone else was playing for $1 million. He said in his final words, I cannot imagine why someone would want to keep Aaron over me in the Warrior Alliance. And I was thinking, he literally can't imagine that. And that's a big part of his problem.
Yeah, yes, I think so. Really early on, he makes the statement, I will never align with her, talking about Aaron early on because he's decided that she's not worthy. And it's like, but you might need to. And as we saw in the 12th episode or the 11th or however you number it, the one before he went, he did need to woo and align with her and Sierra to have any chance of getting further. But in his mind, because he's made this statement, I will never. And he makes a lot of never always statements. He makes a lot of definitive statements. And that's where there's just no flexibility in those kinds of statements and in that kind of thinking that those statements display. So not flexible.
Now, and another part, of course, was, as we already mentioned, he said he would never lie. But here's the thing. He did. Sierra demonstrated, that he did by telling the story of Coach and Debbie approaching her to reform their tribal alliance and be Timbira strong. But while Coach accused Sierra of having a faulty memory, it was clear that he was the one suffering from that. Now, I asked him about the situation when I interviewed him. I asked him a lot of questions that I was like, well, what the hell? I'll just throw it all at him here. And he admitted that he was wrong. He claimed that he confused that conversation with one from a couple days earlier, when Sierra supposedly approached him. Now, it's convenient we don't have footage of the time that Sierra supposedly approached him a couple days earlier. But he did say to me, I wish I would have handled the Sierra situation better. I was not lying to stay in the game.
I'd almost believe that he wasn't lying to stay in the game. I think that lie is much more about it shatters the shell, this mask that he wears of the warrior, the noble person. More about he shouldn't have lied to shore up his view of himself, rather than he shouldn't have lied, to stay in the game, because I don't think he was trying for that. He said it would make him physically sick to ally with Erin, which is Sierra, and in that time it was such a mess, and it was so obvious that Sierra was at least telling the truth from her viewpoint, that JT and Stephen knew. But I think they probably knew anyway. I mean, I think anybody that says they never lie and they only work with integrity is going to be viewed suspiciously by Survivor players.
Yeah. Now, I do think, where do we put in the stuff about lies? Well, I put it into this rule, but I do think there are other problems with his claims of honesty. On the Survivor Insider videos, he told JT and Steven a story of when he had a brain tumor 2 years earlier, and the doctors gave him 6 weeks to live because there was nothing anyone could do about it. But he fought it mentally and shrunk it down to the size of a pinky. Now, JT told us the story doesn't sound legit to him, adding, Coach may be a little bit delusional. I worry about Coach sometimes. And JT was right to be skeptical, because Coach previously had an interview with another website, not mine, in which he said he had tests done because they thought he had a brain tumor, but he did not have a tumor after all. Then, when I spoke to him, I didn't ask him directly about this, but he mentioned, we were talking about his tattoos, and he mentioned he had gotten one of them when, quote, I had the growth on the back of my head. So he even called it a growth, not a cancer, not tumor. I suppose it's possible some doctor misdiagnosed him or told him, if it's a tumor, you might only have 6 weeks to live. But he made these contradictory statements. And let's face it, there's no way Survivor is giving the medical okay to someone who has a brain tumor.
It would be a very different game, huh?
Yeah.
And also, I think just generally, doctors no longer give people amounts of time, because they are either obedient or they don't know, and it's not common practice, and it hasn't been since probably for 15 or 20 years. I don't think. Yeah, it just sounds very dramatic. I have weeks to live.
Yes, and
yes,
and then. So, I mean, people may wonder, why are you even bringing this up? It's all about his quote unquote honesty, which was related to his inflexibility. But again, he wasn't honest. Now, going to Coach's final words, not just the ones that we saw, but the ones from the Survivor Insider Extras, as recapped by, at the time, my insider recapper, Carrie Kennedy. Coach said, I did not dishonor myself. I told the truth at all times. I did not mislead anyone. And as a warrior, I find the honor in defeat more than the honor in victory. Well, as Carrie noted, I think Coach really believes the things he's saying here. He did lie and deceive, but he doesn't seem to realize he did so. It's amazing how anyone who doesn't do what Coach wants is evil. As another example of his changing memory, he said in his day after video that he went to exile to show how he was still the man, even though his body was failing. And again, as Carrie said, wait, I thought he went to exile because JT sent him there despite his pleas. So this goes back to the same changing narrative thing that you were talking about when it came to voting out Tyson.
Yes, I mean, there was discussion even prior to the challenge, with Coach saying, well, it would be noble for JT or I to go and not to send the girls. But, I don't think so. Then when JT wins, he looks at them all and he says, any volunteers? And that was a great moment for Coach to step forward. He didn't do it. And then JT selects him and says, do the noble thing. At which point then Coach switches on the monastic approach, the marvelous monastic approach, that he's going to go and make this a spiritual and a proving ground for his manhood. He even says while he's out there that that Indigenous people would go out as boys to become men. Then he hears what he's said and he says, "But I'm already a man, so this will mean I become more of a man." You almost love him.
Yes.
Love him.
Yes. All right. The fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control them. And in many ways, all of Coach's game was driven by emotion, because that's that's the basis of his whole push for honesty and integrity and everything else. But even more specifically than that, there were also times when he got angry. After the vote against Sierra, a couple episodes before this one, Coach lost his damn mind because Stephen and Debbie got votes from Taj and Aaron. He ranted that people who don't play the game even half as honestly or courageously as him pisses him off. And, Debbie wisely told him that he had to let it go or it'll drive him nuts. But Coach wasn't one to let go of anything. To him, they were cowards because they had the nerve to not vote the way he wanted them to.
It's true. And it's not as if they voted against him, because Sierra had voted for him and now she was gone. So that's the person to be, if you like, how dare you vote for me? But it was about the behavior of other women voting for his warrior guys. I mean, I certainly took the most notes about don't let your emotions control you, because I think where I was sort of a little bit anti-Coach when I first started watching the season, to be honest. I thought, I wish this wasn't the person we were talking about. But I found, compassion, and it was actually through this. He doesn't realize how he's revealing himself as the little boy that wants to align with the big boys, that wants to be in the gang, that wants to be seen a certain way. And his vulnerability comes up in this incredible emotionality that he plays the game with. And the way his anger is a very righteous anger, and his division of people into good and evil is really the people that like me and massage me. Like JT was very good at deferring to Coach. Yes, Coach. Oh yes, good job, and all of that. And the people who defy me and speak against me and don't do what I say. And this is this incredible emotionality, but it's very revealing. And I think I'm almost intrigued now to watch his later seasons, because I think that he might have gained a little more insight. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember. I think he definitely became more of a character, and he saw what he was and played into it more. But also, we just watched Heroes versus Villains, and in that, earlier in the season, Tyson, Coach is upset, and Tyson has to pull him aside, and he goes to Tyson and wants advice, and Tyson says, "Well, I'll give you advice, but you're not going to like it." And he said to him, 1, stop wearing the stupid feathers at tribal council. You look silly. 2, stop telling your stories. Nobody believes them. And that's the advice that he gave him. But of course, as soon as that happened, he ignored all of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to his commitment to the character of Coach.
Yeah.
Him having probably seen his first season and understanding why Survivor production wants him and fulfilling, their want. I did note that he did his, what we'll call Tai Chi. I know he says he's the only white man to know this. But I've said that he does his Tai Chi in full view of everybody, in full view. So he talks about meditation, spirituality. I would just sort of go off to the side. Were it me, I'd go off to the side, but no, full view. So the sweeping camera shots can happen. He comes back. Sierra calls him hilarious. Coach, you're hilarious. And he actually can't hear that word, because he can't believe that somebody would see him like that when he's been nobly out in the water, thanking the Creator for having been created. And he asks her to repeat it. And she says that he's hilarious. And this is what I'm talking about, that vulnerability that you see. He looks genuinely hurt, like really hurt. And then he switches it and he says, Sierra, after her comments today, she is the bowel movement that comes out of the dragon. So for having made this light, flippant comment, it was really very disgusting. And I would have been even more furious had I not seen that moment of genuine little boy hurt from her comment. I think that the comments that people make, which makes him turn on them, or it's not their fault, he decides to turn on them after they've made the comments, genuinely hurt him and genuinely cut him. And we know that you can't take things personally, especially on Survivor.
Yeah. But speaking of, kind of that leads right into the fifth rule, which talks about the social game and reminds players they need to pretend to be nice. But that wasn't something Coach was particularly interested in doing. He often didn't care at all what his tribe mates thought. In episode 6, for example, there was what Brendan called another one of those Coach moments, which even became the episode title. It was actually funny. There were at least three in a row quotes that were either about Coach or by Coach, episode titles. But so what happened was they were boiling the beans while a storm was rolling in. Everyone else thought the beans were done, but not Coach. He liked them a certain way. He liked them softer. So he poured in river water, which meant the pot had to heat up again and boil for at least 6 minutes to sterilize everything. But then the storm came in, and instead of staying out there, Coach left the beans and gets in the shelter. By the time the storm passes, many of the beans had burned, all the water had boiled off, and they had turned to charcoal. Now, this is a situation where you have so little food, and he destroyed a full meal. Then what made it worse was he acted like he had done nothing wrong. And Sierra was, telling the truth, as she often did. And she said if anyone else had done that, he'd have been all over them. And that's true. And then, the next episode, Coach told us that 20 days in, he had been having to hold in his thoughts on all the annoying things his tribe mates were doing. It's like,
I didn't see him holding it in, really.
What? You were annoyed by them?
It was quite a scene with the tribe mates kind of chewing on the charcoal beans from the bottom of the pot that he had burnt. And there was not a word of apology from him. And they're just thinking, I've got to eat something. I've got to get this charcoal in. But she was right that there were things that he did that he would have slammed other people from doing. And this is this lack of self-reflection and self-knowledge that I think maybe he gets a little spark of later. Maybe I'm being too generous.
Well, I mean, in his day after video from Survivor Insider, he said that he found the game to be a spiritual journey, which made it hard to listen to the small talk at camp. So I guess that was his excuse for not getting along with everyone. But in the meantime, he told story after story, believing people wanted to hear them, but people neither wanted to hear them, nor did they think they were real. Brendan said at one point, if I don't believe his stories, how can I believe what he's saying to my face?
Absolutely.
And that's a very good point. And this is where the social game kind of links in, because while we might not have known how much truth there was to some of his stories, we could see the exaggeration just in this episode, this 12th episode. When he talked about his time on exile, he told us while he was there, he said, I had very little water. Okay, fast forward to him showing up at the immunity challenge, and he told Jeff Probst, his fellow players, I didn't have any water. Now, these are not the same thing. And we don't know what the truth was. We only know he told the cameras, I had very little water. For all we know, he was chugging it down. But there's even a difference between I had very little and I had none. And, then go past the challenge. And after the challenge was over, Coach said if medical would look at his back, they'd take him out of the game. And I go along with what Aaron and Taj said. He didn't, even before they said it, I was thinking the exact same thing. He didn't want medical to look at his back because they'd say nothing's wrong. And that would ruin all his drama and all his exaggeration.
Absolutely. And even in the way that he talks about, I can't talk to someone who has no honor. You all can. You can all do it, but I'm too pure to do it. So again, this is not playing the social game, because not only are you cutting yourself off from talking to absolutely everybody, which of course you should constantly be checking with everybody, but it also elevates, in his speech, it elevates him above these other people who are quite able to talk to evil and dishonorable people, unlike him. And to the water thing, I did notice both that, and that when he steps into line for the instruction for the immunity challenge, he whispers to JT, "Can I have some?"
And then he grabs the water.
Can I have some water? And then he turns away. Don't look at me drinking it. Don't look at me drinking it. And chugs it down. It's like, oh, please.
Yeah.
And the thing is, as we know from Exile, I mean, they did have probably a fairly hard time, but there's a gorgeous scene early on where Taj confesses to Stephen that it's not that bad. And they both have a good old laugh when she's telling him about the secret alliance. And he's saying, "Oh, is it hard out there?" And she said, "No, it's not. It's not that hard. It's not that hard." I mean, I think if it's raining and you don't have a fire and all of those sorts of things, it's not pleasant, but it certainly doesn't pop 3 discs and they bulge and your asthma. And yes, but I don't want to make excuses, as he says. I don't want to make excuses.
Yeah. Now, I did have an interview, just so we know, because I doubted his asthma, because I have asthma, and nothing I saw from him made it look like any sort of asthma attack. But I will say that in one of my other interviews, they did mention, yes, he really does have asthma. One of the other players. So
yeah, I wasn't so much. Yeah. Right. I wasn't so much questioning his asthma. I was questioning the list of ailments, including asthma. But I make no excuses. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Now, when you just made.
Yeah. Now, when Debbie turned on Coach last episode, she did say, he was pretty much driving everyone crazy in camp, including herself, and she'd been with him the whole time. She said, people are tired of comments and directives and not doing a whole lot around camp. And then in this episode, of course, Aaron called him out, while Taj talked about him being a jerk and said she was so ready to send his ass home.
The biggest jerk on the planet, says Aaron. One-upping Taj. Just, a jerk. Aaron, biggest jerk on the planet.
Yeah. So, well. All right. Well, the 6th rule warns against being too much of a threat, and I cannot imagine that Coach was in any way, shape, or form a threat to win at the end. That said, Stephen apparently was worried about it, because in this episode, he commented that Coach still had a lot of strength and fight in him, and you want to take someone to the end that you can beat. Now, personally, I would have thought everybody would want Coach at the end, because I can't imagine him getting any votes. But then again, Stephen didn't get any votes against JT. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly in later seasons we see that the very annoying person either goes early or is kept on very late because of that idea of the final 2, which I know is Appendix A, keep your end goals in mind. But so I was thinking that too, of like, why wouldn't you keep Coach? He hasn't done that much in challenges. He's a really predictable player. Brendan calls him predictable. And as we've discussed, because he was so open about who he liked and who he didn't like and what was right and what was wrong, you could see where his votes were going to go. JT, as you said, he's a few steps ahead. But I think it might have come to a point of they just couldn't do with him anymore. They just couldn't do with him anymore. Yeah. And they kind of knew who their final 3 was.
Right. All right. Well, the 7th rule covers dealing with idols and advantages, and Coach didn't manage to get an idol. He did repeatedly try to convince JT and Stephen to get rid of Taj because of her idol. But little did he know that was actually Stephen's idol. Because I did find it interesting that they actually broached the subject of who owned the idol. And I didn't remember that, because Taj gave it to Stephen, so it was his. Now, she thought she was just giving it to him to hold, But when you give someone an idol on Survivor, it's theirs. He put it in his pocket. He had it for a while. Taj found it when she was going to make a fake immunity idol, and she wanted to see the real one. So she found it and she took it because in her mind, it was still hers. But then when Steven and JT discussed it several episodes ago, they realized it wasn't really hers. You could see them talking through it. And to me, it would have been interesting to see that play out on screen. Like Taj stands up and says, I want to play this idol, Jeff. And Jeff would have had to respond, I'm sorry, but that's not your idol to play. Please give it back to Steven.
I was fascinated. I had completely forgotten that as well. And it was a really good, see, this is where you can see JT and Steven obeying all your rules, but especially that flexibility one. Taj is an absolute ride or die alliance member. However, a circumstance has arisen which changes things potentially. And it behoves you to think about that, to discuss it. And certainly they discussed it. They discussed that it was now safely buttoned back into the back pocket of Steven's arseless dress pants. So therefore it was Steven's. And should they vote out Taj? And this is what good players do. They don't say, I'm going to, I want to. This is the, should we? Let's think it through and see if we should. So I found that very interesting. And yes, I would have loved to have seen that, but glad perhaps that they didn't, because I found her very compelling watching her play again. But for Coach with idols and advantages, he never wanted to go to exile where they knew there were clues to idols. Mm-hmm. So he never put himself in the position of finding the clue and trying to find the idol for himself. And the only thing he could think of to do with an idol was to vote out the person who had it, not ally with them, discuss, ask them for it. I mean, you know, all the other things that you can do with idols. It was as if he didn't want that to intrude on the purity of the way he was playing.
Yeah. All right. Appendix A is about the rest of the tribe keeping their end goals in mind when voting, and says to vote out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong, of course. Aaron and Taj wanted to get rid of Coach for many perfectly good reasons. Steven apparently felt he had to do that as well. And I guess it's probably true that Coach had a better shot of winning immunity than Taj or Aaron. Plus, he was more likely to take Warrior JT to the end instead of Wizard Steven. You know, so from that point of view, Steven was right to oust him. But I don't know. I mean, yes, you should be getting rid of the strong, unaligned players at this point. He was in an alliance, but so was everyone. Everyone was in some sort of alliance at that point. I don't know that I would consider him one of the strong players, though.
Yes. I mean, certainly the way that he was creeping around. I mean, he's 37 in this. That really shocked me, how young he was. Talk about age. Mm-hmm. I thought a 37-year-old man who is fit. I mean, he has muscles and he does his Tai Chi and everything. His showing in the group immunity challenges, of course, I was watching him particularly because we were going to talk today, mm-hmm. And his showing in individual challenges was very middle of the road. And I thought that if you were just putting them side by side, that I would think Aaron would be a stronger player in those physical challenges. And especially as we get towards the end and they become endurance, and we know that small, light women have an advantage in those endurance challenges, even though the actual one that he went out in was endurance and there were two men at the end. Nonetheless, if I was looking forward, I might see Aaron as more of a challenge, although you would question her friends on the jury and wonder where those votes were.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so we are through the rules here. What are your final thoughts to wrap things up for you?
My final thoughts.
So you have paper
Coach,
notes. You really are playing the role of Jessica here.
Yeah, I am. Here you go. For the people who are just listening on the sound, that was paper. So Coach came into the game saying, I want to change the game from start to finish. I've said that from the beginning. Like others before and since, he insisted he would never lie, that he and only he had honor and integrity, and he poured scorn on those he saw as liars and cowards, cowards, cowards all around him. He said he was surrounded by wishy-washy people of no character. He called women cancer, poison apples, and, as we said, unfortunately, bowel movements, and makers of pebbles into boulders. He saw only men as his true competitors, but a small voice inside him told community, "Did you hear me say Dragon Slayer?" His fables and
Looks like we lost you there in the middle of your conclusion, which is not a great,
my beautiful conclusion.
Yes. Why don't you go ahead and finish up, or I don't know where.
Go
you
ahead
were
and finish
exactly.
up. I'll get right to that. I don't know quite where I am. I was banging on about all sorts of things. When he went to Exile Island, he forgot he was playing a game for $1 million and made it about his spiritual journey, alienating those around him. On Exile, he posed for the camera as it swept by him with marvelous music playing, loving himself in the moment, and maybe we loved him a little bit too. Despite his posturing, he perhaps did have a profound experience on Exile, but it was nothing to do with the game. In the end, he was breakable, bending, yielding, measurable, movable, and vincible. And that is why Coach lost.
All right. Well, it's funny because I have some of the same quotes you do here. Coach said, "I don't care about the $1 million. I care about my integrity and honor and changing this game from start to finish." And a number of Survivor players over the years have said they were going to do what Coach wanted to do. None have accomplished it. And there's a reason for that. This is a game, not a mission for King Arthur's Round Table. Coach was not Sir Lancelot. He was closer to Don Quixote, tilting at windmills. Maybe he didn't care about the $1 million, but everyone else did. In our interview, Coach told me, "I'm not delusional. I've done everything I claim to have done. It has tested who I am. It has been some wonderfully high times and some low times. I am who I am, but I probably learned that nobody can take away that identity that I have." And that's great for him. I met Coach once in Reno, and he seemed like a nice enough guy for the few minutes that I was there. But as we've mentioned a few times now, that's not what these rules of this podcast is about. Despite Coach's protestations to the contrary, he did indeed scheme and plot, though he hampered himself by not having any secrets. He was completely inflexible, emotional, and had a hard time socially integrating himself with his tribe mates. Yes, he lasted through almost the whole game, but part of it was just being taken along. He kept saying he was in control, but that was never the case. First, it was Tyson doing all the actual work, and then JT and Steven took over. In the end, the women wanted to get rid of Coach because of how annoying he was. Meanwhile, Steven wanted to do it for strategic reasons. Coach had multiple problems that were going to keep him from winning, with a big one being that he supposedly didn't care if he won. On Survivor, you have to do what needs to be done, and that includes scheming, plotting, lying, and adapting yourself to the situation around you. Coach wouldn't do any of these things and just wanted to change the game to suit his own moral code. Well, we recently finished season 40, and the game still hasn't changed in that regard. It's about playing to win, which Coach refused to do. And that is why Coach lost.
Wonderful.
Well, all
David,
right.
You're right.
All right. Now you are Jessica. See, look at that.
Yes, I had to get it in once. I forgot to say it earlier.
All right. Well, before we look ahead to the next episode, let me remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in both poster and t-shirt form. So again, for the shirt, go to robhasawebsite.com or robhasapodcast.com, click on the merch link, then sort to see newer items first. For the poster, go to tinyurl.com/DavidRulesPoster2. Next week is the final stop in the Survivor journey through time. And I believe Jessica will be back. I hope that she will be able to overcome her work issues. We're going back to the end of the beginning in episode 13 of the very first season of Survivor. So I will, we will be rewatching that whole season. I was going to say I believe, but I know that is the season I've watched more than any. I have the DVD. I've watched that multiple times. This time because it's a lot easier to watch it on CBS All Access when CBS All Access doesn't freeze on me. I'll watch it that way. But even before we go through that episode, I do want to remind people again that you can see or hear me, Jessica, and another different member of the class of 2020 for our second Big Brother Why Blank Lost podcast in just a few days. And of course, we don't know who that will be yet. Well, I have some suspicions of who that will be, but we're a non-spoiler for that. So anyway, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Once you join, you'll see that Rob does tons of these patron-only call-in shows a month, plus a weekly Q&A show with Nicole, plus trivia, plus mafia, all these things. As I mentioned before, in the past couple months, he's done a 7-hour patron call-in show and then a 6-hour patron call-in show. And of course, even when Rob isn't talking directly to everyone, there are the Facebook groups to keep people occupied, talk about Survivor, Big Brother, life in general. So again, everyone remember to go to robhasawebsite.com/patron, and we will see you there. Another way that people, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, if I really am Jessica, I should do the thank yous, but we might not be up to that yet.
No, not well. See, she would say something like that too. So, let me go ahead and do the Twitter stuff here. So another place that people can contact us, I am, as it says right there, at David Bloomberg on Twitter. Jessica, who's not here, is at Jessica Lewis 89, and Sarah, you are at Sarah Carradine.
At Sarah Carradine.
So is there any place else that people can find you, or is Twitter the best place?
Twitter's the best place. I like the tweeties.
Okay. Any ideas for a hashtag? And no, not bowel movement of the dragon. We're not going to do that.
No, don't say that. Don't say that. It's so awful. I almost didn't want to bring it up, but I think that it just smooths over some ugliness if, he said, well, should we use his own words? I know who I am. That's a bit general. How about hashtag Vincible?
Vincible. I like it. Hashtag Vincible. VINCIBLE.
Yes.
Because he was not invincible. So when those two cancel, you get Vincible. And of course, there's the hashtag for this podcast overall, YX Lost. So everyone should make sure you're subscribed to all of the RHAP Survivor podcasts at robhasapodcast.com/survivor or on your favorite podcatcher. We, of course, are also on the reality TV RHAP Ups feed. And by subscribing to the RHAP Ups feed, you also automatically get our Big Brother podcast as well. Or you can just survive to everything that RHAP does, plus the RHAP Ups. So just subscribe to everything. Now, also on the RHAP Ups right now, the hottest show of 2020 is The Mole. At least that's the hot take from the team at Mole Patrol, which is a reality TV RHAP Ups podcast about the long-gone reality thriller hosted by Anderson Cooper. Each week, Josh Wigler, Jessica Leese, and Brooklyn Zed are on the hunt for the Mole, a double agent among a cast of 10 players vying for a cash prize. The catch is that only one of the three podcasters has no idea who the Mole is. Josh Wigler has never seen the Mole before, while Brooklyn Zed and Jess have multiple times each. I'm watching along with them too, and the Mole was one of my favorite shows. As a matter of fact, the Mole from season 2 wrote about Survivor for my website after the Mole was over. I think, yeah. So I think the column was, the Mole's view on Survivor or something like that.
Yeah. It's a terrific podcast, and I'd never seen The Mole before, so I've been watching along. I started off trying to be with Josh, and just I couldn't help myself. I did look ahead. I do know who the Mole is. Either way, you can just listen to the podcast. You can listen and watch along, or you can remember. It's a terrific show.
Yeah, I mean, the podcast is perfect for anyone who has seen the show and wants that boost of nostalgia, or anyone who's discovering the mole for the first time, like you are. And well, you could have had a spoiler-free experience alongside Josh, but you spoiled yourself.
Could
The
have.
funny thing is,
I did.
that as I was watching, I'm like, oh my gosh, who's the mole? I can't remember. And as I've been watching now, I'm like, okay, I think I know who the final three are. I think I remember who the mole is, but I'm not 100% sure. So there's a little bit of mystery for me still, just a little bit. So everyone can listen to Mole Patrol every week, and they can even send feedback into molepatrol@robhasawebsite.com. So if you want to go ahead and do the thanks, now would be the time.
I will, and I hope I get them all right. So thanks to Scott St. Pierre, who edits all the podcasts and does an absolutely terrific job. Thank you, Scott. Thanks so much to Will from America, who does the theme song to this and many of the RHAP has a podcast network shows, including other songs like It's Karate Time, available on iTunes. Well done, Will. Thank you to Jessica for letting me sit in her seat and rustle her papers. Thanks, Jessica. I can't wait to have you back. And David, thank you very much for having me on the show today. And thank you to Rob for everything that he does in this network.
Yes, and I want to give you a big thanks for jumping in, watching all these episodes, and having a great podcast here. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So with that, I will hopefully people will hear me. I won't see them necessarily, but in a few days for Big Brother, and then again next week for the finale of the first season of Survivor. Thanks again. Bye.